LS Miata in the shop today for some upgrades and apparently some repairs. Noticed some issues when I just pulled it out of the garage. It was fine when I parked it there. One of those things. If you're unfamiliar with this car, this is my competition drift car. It's got a 6.2 liter, basically truck version of an LS3. Cam, springs, all that, makes right around 500 wheel, has suspension, angle, cage, all that good stuff. And we have been competing in a series called Clutch Kickers with this car. So Clutch Kickers is a drift series with really high payouts. They pay out over 25 grand each round. So first place gets 10 grand, so on and so forth. What that does is it attracts a lot of really high level drivers, really high level cars, guys from, you know, the grassroots like me all the way up to legit Pro 1 drivers and teams. So it's a really cool mix. It's a really good place to go and really see how you stack up, because you kind of are all on a level playing field. You can bring whatever car you want and compete against, you know, some of the guys in the top level of competitive drifting. So it's a lot of fun, but you got to be on your A game. So that being said, even though we did manage to win the last round, obviously the car is working and is competitive. I still have changes I want to make. I'm always trying to fine tune this car and get as much out of it as I can, make it as efficient as possible for what it is. So we've got some changes to make, some upgrades to make that I think are going to make this thing a whole lot better. Let me lift it up and I'll tell you what we're working on. All right, so I actually have a handful of projects planned for this thing before our next comp in about a week and a half. So always kind of running it down to the wire, always a little bit of a time crunch, but I think we'll get them done. But where I want to start is the rear end here. The big thing, the big change, we're going to be switching from this welded diff to a limited slip diff. And I have a few reasons for this, and it's something that I've thought about doing for quite a while now, and that axle snapping is kind of what pushed me over the edge to say, like, you know what, let's do it now. So real quick, let me just explain my reasoning behind going from a welded diff, which I've had in the car for 3 years now, to a limited slip. All right, so just a quick explanation of how differentials work for anyone who's unfamiliar. If you are familiar, I apologize, I'll make this quick, I promise. So traditionally, you have what's called an open diff. So if you put the car in the air, for example, you spin one wheel forward, the other one will spin backwards. They're connected, essentially, but what ends up happening is one wheel gets the power. The wheel with the least traction gets the power. So let's say you go up and you're three-wheeling and you've got one of those wheels off the ground, usually that's the one that's gonna spin. Same with if you're going around a turn, the car is loaded up on the left side, the inside wheel has less traction because a lot of weight is off of it because of the weight jacking, that wheel is the one that's gonna spin. Now that's not ideal for drifting, because what ends up happening is you get one wheel spinning and the other wheel is just along for the ride. So then it's pretty hard to get the car to step out because you're fighting that traction of the outside wheel just rolling. So then comes the welded diff. So in a welded diff, if you jack the car up, both wheels would spin forward. Both wheels are directly connected. There's no slack between them. You spin this wheel, one revolution, that one is spinning one revolution. Forward, forward, backwards, backwards. They are directly connected. Now, the problem comes in, and why open diffs exist in the first place, is if you're making a turn. We're not drifting here, we're just taking a turn. So your outside wheel has to travel a lot more distance than your inside wheel. So let's say the outside's got to go 25 feet, the inside's got to go 15 feet. So that means, let's say, I didn't do the actual math on this, the outside wheel needs to spin 4 times to make that distance. The inside wheel only needs to spin 3. So since they're directly connected, that means this wheel has to do another rotation than what it needs to do, which is where you get that chirping. And that's where the tire is skipping off the ground to keep up with the outside wheel. So that's the difficulty with the welded diff. Now there is another option, and that is a limited slip differential. So this is kind of a cross between the two. There's multiple types and there's multiple levels of intensity, right? Some have 30% lockup, some 70, 80, 90%. Some only lock on acceleration, some lock on acceleration and deceleration. But the gist of it is there is some sort of a friction material in between the two wheels. So they are connected, but there is some slip there. So what happens is when you're off throttle, generally, making a turn, that inside wheel can slip that amount it needs to not have to make that extra rotation. But then when you get on throttle, the clutches are essentially forced apart everything tightens up, and then both wheels spin. So you get that ability to get both rear tires spinning in the case of drifting. In the case of road racing or drag racing, you're able to use both tires. You're not just putting the power through one tire while you're trying to accelerate. You've got both tires, which obviously equals a lot more traction. So that's the gist of how it all works. Very, very simple terms. But let me explain why I want to go to a limited slip. All right, so this is the LSD I got. This is a Auburn Pro Series limited slip. So cool thing is with the 4-8 differentials, stuff like this is so cheap because it's such a common differential and came in the domestic market. So there's so many domestic companies that make limited slips for it. So the reason I wanted to try this is I've had a lot of experience with both welded diff cars and limited slip diff cars, and we're kind of splitting hairs here. We're talking about fine details and really kind of nitpicky stuff, but the thing about a limited slip, when you're drifting, if the car starts to over-rotate, what you can do is press the clutch in and kind of disconnect the engine from the wheels and try to let the car rotate back around. With a welded diff, even when the clutch is in, both wheels are still attached. One's still on a tire radius, the other one still has to scrub. So you're still fighting the friction of that tire scrubbing. With a limited slip diff, depending on the type you have, when you clutch in, the wheels can unlock, rotate independently, and you kind of have less drag and friction keeping the car from coming back around. That's one thing. Also, when you're pedaling it, and even full throttle, there's still some slip for that tire that needs to go less distance. Especially if you start feathering the throttle to try to pick traction back up and accelerate or shallow up on angle. So in those situations, I think the LSD is a bit better. This will be the first time I've really gone from a welded diff in one car straight to a limited slip in that same car without changing anything else. So I'm really curious how this does. It could not be noticeable at all. Could be very noticeable. Could be worse, you know, but at this point with this car, for me, it's about the fine details. It's all those little things just kind of chasing, making the car just a little bit better and more competitive every time. So I'm excited to try this out. This is something I've thought about doing for a long, long time. I wasn't sure how good these diffs were, but we're gonna give it a shot. Now, the downfall is it is a decent bit of work. We gotta pull the diff out, and then we gotta blow it apart and swap over everything to this center section and then put it all back together. So not gonna be the most fun project of all, but could be very worth it. So I'm gonna quit jibber jabbering. I know that was a whole heck of a lot of it, and we're gonna get to work. All right, so we need to pop the axles out and then pull the diff out. Gonna leave the drive shaft in for now. I think we're gonna have to pull the trans out, but I want to get this done, back together, drive it, see how it is, and then we'll move on to pulling the trans. She's out. Getting anything that's RTV'd off is the worst, especially something like this. There's just no pry spots. All right, got the diff on the table here. Pull it apart. Alright, went to the parts store, got some fresh carrier bearings. This is a good example of why I run an LS in the cars that need to be really reliable like a drift car because it came in a lot of stuff in America, thus it's easy to get parts for it. I say that because this being a Ford 8.8, these were in stock at the parts store. In stock. If this was like a 240 diff, you'd have to special order this. And funny things have come full circle. When I worked at the parts store, when I was a young buck, like 18, 19, I ended up getting into commercial because the commercial guy basically showed me the ropes, got the customers to trust me, yada, yada, yada. He left for another store. I ended up taking over commercial there. Interesting experience. They didn't want me to do it because I was too young, so on and so forth. Anyway, he's now at the parts store. That's where I live now. So he's now my parts guy, which is amazing because he's awesome and he knows everything and can find you anything. All right, we need to press these on. Don't ever try to get by in a workshop without a press. Side done, one to go. All right, now we need to swap our ring gear over. All right, new bearings. Ring gear swapped over. Now we just need to put it back together. Need to grab some gear oil. I don't think I have what I need. I might have some. Alright, torque her down. Alright, I'm going to use this Polymer Blue. A viewer recommended it to me, and I was really curious about it. It's like a non-setting gasket compound. So it's supposed to be reusable. I'm curious. We'll give it a shot here. It's a good thing to try it on, because it's not the end of the world if we ever had to take this back off. Oh wow, this is very liquidy. Oh wow, this is very liquidy. Weird. Never know if something works till you try it, right? I'm really curious to see how this stuff works, to be honest. I just like trying new things. Like, it might be a waste of time, it might not work. We might have to redo this. But if it does work, we might have found a new thing that's way nicer to deal with than our TV. So we gotta wait 5 minutes and then tighten it again. But you get the idea. So this is pretty much done. We'll toss it back in the car here in a minute. Get it bolted up. I can't. I'm gonna lose my mind with this squeaking. That fixes it. Oh, finally. That was so annoying. So this is a Multi-Max synthetic lubricant from today's video sponsor, the Blaster Corp, most commonly known as the originators of PB Blaster. If you don't know what PB Blaster is, you've probably never worked on a car with any sort of corroded or hard to get off bolt. This stuff will save your life. I have been using this stuff for 10 years. Most of you on here can attest to the powers of PB Blaster. But the Multimax synthetic lubricant. This stuff people are sleeping on. I highly encourage you to try it. Try it. You will be blown away. I have been blown away by everything I have tried this on. I'm really not embellishing here. Like, try it, report back, I promise. But both of these have an upgrade. They now have the Pro Straw. So this is amazing because now your straw isn't a one-time use thing that's taped to your can and then falls off after the first time you use it. It's attached to the can. Flip it up, flip it down, right? But the biggest thing, the biggest game changer is the flow control. The flow control is huge. I use this all the time. I couldn't go back to not having flow control. You can turn it up and go on full kill mode, but you can turn it down and just spray just enough to get the job done. So no more having to soak the whole area just to get it in one little spot. Like getting in those caster oils, I was able to just right on the caster, minimal mess. So the Pro Straw is huge. Even if you already have either of these, if you don't have them with the Pro Straw, it's worth getting a new can. I mean, you know how long PV lasts. I've had cans of this for like 4 years and I use it all the time. But anyway, I'm jibber jabbering on. This stuff is just incredible. The Blaster Corp is an awesome company and I really appreciate them sponsoring today's video. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. But I said enough jibber jabber. Let's get back to work. Let's get this diff back in so we can go test drive the car so we can go see if the limited slip diff locks as good as I'm hoping it does, or if we are going to have to take it back out and put the open diff back in, because that would be pretty terrible. Let's get back to work. Now that our transjack doesn't squeak. Put the drive shaft back in, axles back in, and then we're good to go. Well, then we gotta fill it up with fluid. I don't know how long this stuff's supposed to sit. I mean, it's supposed to be non-setting, so maybe it doesn't have to, but we're gonna wait till tomorrow anyway. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. We'll put the fluid in it, test it. Hopefully it all goes well. Alrighty, got this thing filled up with diff fluid. I did spill some, as usual. Got the friction additive that came with the diff in there. The correct specified gear oil, which was non-synthetic, 80/90, which all I have in synthetic, so I had to go get some. I think we're ready to go. I'm hoping I can find somewhere, somehow, to do a test rip in this thing. I kind of wish I would have, hold on, let me lift this car up so I can show you this other thing. I wish I would have just done it last night. I didn't think about the fact that today, middle of the day, is gonna be a hard time to go do some test drifting. And we've got to kind of tear the car apart otherwise, so I don't want to do that and then not, you know, whatever. Anyway, I'm going to toss the rest of the exhaust back on, the last 2 bits, and we're going to go test drive this thing and see how this diff works. I'm excited. I've wanted to do this for a long time, and it really wasn't that bad. Just, I hope it's good. I do not want to take it back out, take it apart, and put the welded diff back in. I will tell you that much. All right, enough jibber jabber. Let's get to driving. Not working, driving. Yeah, I feel like I sit so high in this car. I sit so low in that thing. I have to take the cushions out of my seat. I've also got my chill out shirt on because it's hot out. You know what's funny is this thing's smoother than the Zafiro, which is the street car, and this is the race car. Alright, well, the test drive went well. It left 2 identical, very thick, very dark black marks on the street in Mexico. I feel like it's totally fine, right? The only reason I'm even concerned about this, if this was like a Tomei 1.5 way like I have in the Zafiro, I wouldn't even give this a second thought. I wouldn't, what? It's gonna work. I know it's gonna work. But I've always been nervous about the LSDs for these 488 diffs. Just like looking at them compared to what I'm used to seeing of how they're normally designed, they just look a little different. And I think it's basically the same thing. What gets me is the springs in the middle. So it's got these springs that push against the spider gears, and then the spider gears have clutches in the housing. So it's pushing against those and activating the clutches, torque sensing and doing all that. I'm sure it's fine. but I don't want to drive all the way out of state to find out that the thing barely locks up when I'm drifting or it unlocks when I'm transitioning. So I really want to take another trip to Mexico and just get a couple skids off, get a couple rips off, ideally do, a couple donuts and a transition back the other way, just so I'm convinced that it's going to be good. However, I really want to pull the trans out because we've been having this, it started at the last event, this weird grinding issue. It's only when you slip the clutch for a long time in second when you're taking off like moderately. Doesn't happen when you take off slow. Doesn't happen when you launch the car. Only happens when you're in that in-between. I don't know what it is. Could be the throw-out bearing, could be the pilot bearing, which would really suck. We can pull the trans out in the car. It's kind of a pain with the headers, but we leave the bell housing. If we need to pull the bell housing and the clutch off, we got to pull the engine out. So I really want to figure that out, but I don't want to take it apart, find out it is X, Y, or Z, which I don't have any of those parts, and then the car's down, and I can't go test out the diff for you guys. What we're going to do is we're going to wait on that. We're going to wait till nightfall, and we're going to go do a street hit on this thing. So that's the plan. I'll see you guys tonight. All right, boys. Ooh. Need to BB that. It is dark enough to where hopefully there's no workers in Mexico, but bright enough to where maybe you'll be able to see something. I kill it, put the kill switch on. It's crazy to turn this car without a welded diff now. No skipping, no chattering. So that is another reason I wanted to put a limited slip in this car. It's a lot less stress on the axle. You think every time you make a tight turn, that axle is twisting until it overcomes the friction that is the traction of the tire and skips the tire. So it's a lot of strain on an axle if you think about it day in, day out, especially with a bunch of steering angle. You're turning even tighter. So it should also help axles live longer too. Alrighty, got this thing back in the shop, back on the lift. Definitely a bummer. I would have gone ahead and pulled the trans out earlier today had I known that every spot was going to be a bust. I thought we'd get at least one spot. It seems like such a simple request. You just need to find a reasonable sized open area of pavement that's not right by everything with no people around. Harder than you would think. Harder than you would think. So yeah, that one little test, that little corner and then kind of manging across, I think it's totally fine. That would be a situation where the diff would unlock since you're not, you don't have momentum sideways. Like the diffs want to unlock usually when you're coming back to straight. So I think it's going to be totally fine. I don't know why I'm so concerned about it. I guess just the design with the springs. It's just, I'm like, is this legit? Is it not? But that's how all of them are for this diff. So I think it's going to be fine. I'm good with it. So we do still need to pull the trans out. That grinding thing is a thing. It's happening, and I need to figure out what that is. We need to tackle the problem before it becomes a bigger problem. So we're going to have to work on that tomorrow, as well as rebuilding some stuff. We've got more work to do. Moral of the story, but it is dark, and I think I'm going to go ahead and call it here. So I really appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for subscribing. I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.